Hey, alright, boys and girls, today we're going to read Chapter 8, Part 2. Let's just double check to make sure that's the right one that we're on. Yep. Hey, I'm getting pretty good at escaping, she thought, kicking Bedbot as hard as she could with both feet and somersaulting away from her toward the door. But the door had closed behind her as she came in, and to open it again she would have to stop and operate the door controls. Behind her, she could hear his stomping, magnetic footfalls of Bedbot as she wiped the glue from her face and started after Astra. Would there be time? The door opened, startling her. The eddying air carried her through it, and there in the corridor outside she found Pilbeam waiting. Pilbeams! Greetings, Astra, said the robot. He closed the door again, muffling the robot's angry shouts. Oh, Pilbeam, she said, hugging him. Did you get to the control room? Have you put the ship right? Pilbeam shook his head. I'm sorry, Astra. Those cakes must have found another way out of the dining hall. They are all over the ship. They attack anything that moves. I was ambushed by a Swiss roll on the way to the control room and I had to turn back. That's funny, said Astra. I didn't see any just now. I came all the way back from the airlock, and there wasn't a big cake to be seen. Only a few crumbs. They must have found something else to hunt, said Pilbeam, giving a little mechanical shudder as he remembered his own narrow escape. Astra gasped. The Poglites! The who? It doesn't matter. Come on, let's get to the control room while the cakes are busy eating them. If there was ever anybody who deserved to be eaten by a cake, it's those Poglites. They drifted on along the corridors, but after a little way, Astra started to feel guilty about what she had said, and after a while more, she stopped. No, they don't, she told Pilbeam. They aren't all bad. Pluto and Poglite, too, were kind. They really, giving me that gloop and everything, I think the captain is the only really bad one. And even he doesn't deserve to be eaten by a cake. We have to warn them. Pilbeam's head went around once or twice in a thoughtful way. Come on, he said. Taking Astra by the hand, he drew down a side passage to a small room whose walls were covered with all kinds of screens. Big screens, little screens, round screens, square screens, oblong screens. If you like screens, thought Astra, this was the place for you. What is this place? She asked. I keep watch on the ship from here, said Pilbeam, when I'm not zooming around mending bits of it, which is most of the time. He touched some switches and the screens filled with video views of the sleeping ship. Empty quarters, silently glowing sleep pods. Even views across the spooky metal moonscapes of the outer hull, and the Poglite ship attached by its collecting bag tunnel. Everything seemed still. They might as well have been photographs, thought Astra, looking one to the next. Then she saw a dark shape go past a camera on one of the lower decks. What was that? She leaned closer, then jumped back as a ferocious fruitcake peered right into the camera, raisins glistening. Eek! She said. I never knew cakes could be so scary. And it had whole cherries stuck in it. I hate those. Astra, look, said Pilbeam. It's Subcorridor G2. On the screen he was pointing to, the plump, dumpy figures of the Poglites were stumping along a corridor, using their arms to grip the walls and deck. They must have been looting the supply cupboards down in that part of the ship, because Astra could see spoons glinting in their bags and pockets, and a few carried larger bits of salvage. There were 7 of them, so Pluto and Poglite, too, caught up with their friends, she said. I wonder if they found out about the cakes yet. I think they're about to, said Pilbeam nervously. Look what's waiting for them in Subcorridor G3. Astra looked at the next screen. At first, all she could see were the ducts and pipes, striped candy cane tubes, the covered sides of the Subcorridor G3. Then, in the shadows between them, she saw movement. Lots of movement. A bristling of sprinkles, a quivering of confectionals custard. Pilbeam, she squeaked, some of those cakes have arms and legs. Yes, Astra, lots of arms and legs. They have been evolving very fast. We have to warn the Poglites. There was a sound button next to the screen with the Poglites on it. Astra poked it and their voices filled the little room. tiny and blurpy and completely impossible to understand, except for Pluto, who had forgotten to turn off her translator and was saying, "You'll never guess what I found in that last cupboard. Sporks! They're like spoons, but they have a forky part too." Ploglight, too, hadn't turned off his translator either. "Oh, Pluto," he said, "everyone knows a spork isn't nearly as valuable as a spoon." "Poglights!" Astra shouted, and they all bumped into one another, dropping their spoons and salvage tools as they looked about in alarm to see where the voice had come from. They shouted, "Pluga! Stoofy!" and "Weebo!" The captain switched his translator on and yelled, "Who said that?" "It's me," Astra shouted. "I'm watching you on screen, and there are cakes lurking just around the corner. Run away! Quickly!" "So you've escaped, have you?" growled the Poglight captain. "You still think you can scare us with your cakes? We are Poglights. We eat cakes for breakfast." "Well, not really for breakfast. That would be weird. But we eat them for afternoon tea." He looked behind him. His crew was a little more worried about Astra's warning than he was. He waved them forward with his salvage grabbers. "Come on, Poglights. More spoons to be had down here." "I can't watch," wailed Astra, and she put her hands over her eyes so she wouldn't have to. But that didn't stop her from hearing what happened next. The yell of surprise from the Poglight captain when he turned the corner. The roar of the cakes as they sprang from their hiding places. The confused crashing and banging and splattering and shouting, mostly in Poglight, but through it all the translated voices of Pluto yelling, "Astra, help!" A less kind-hearted girl than Astra would just have said, "I told you so." A part of her did say that. Whatever horrible cakey things were happening to those Poglights wasn't anybody's fault but their own. And yet, she opened her fingers just a crack and saw a great tumble of movement on the screen. Then a tumbling cake splattered against the camera and the screen went black. "Pilbeam," she said, "we have to help them." "But Astra," she was already throwing herself through the door. Pilbeam struggled to follow her. Out on the corridor again, Astra could dimly hear the sounds of the Cake versus Poglight scuffle going on a few decks below. Or was it above? It was so hard to remember which was which, without any gravity to set you straight. She pulled herself along by the handholds in the walls until she was flying at fair speed toward the source of the noise. Pilbeam came whizzing along behind her and soon caught up. "This way," he said. "Now down here. But please be careful." They sped through the long tube, and suddenly they were at the scene of the battle. It was completely quiet. It was completely deserted. The air was full of drifting crumbs, and there were great splashes of icing and custard on the walls. Dropped Poglight tools and weapons tumbled about midair. There were a lot of spoons. A bag came bobbling toward Astra, and she grabbed it and looked inside. Strange forky little spoon things glinted in there like fish. "Sporks," she said. This was Pluto's bag. "Oh, Pluto!" She looped the bag strap over her head. She felt frightened and a little bit teary, but mostly now she felt cross. All this bother just because the old Nomatron hadn't turned itself off. "That's it!" she shouted. "I have had it with the cakes on this spaceship." "Astra," said Pilbeam suddenly, "behind you." She spun around, expecting a menacing muffin or a wicked whoopie pie. Instead, she saw the nameless horror. Chapter 9.